Have you ever felt that no matter how hard you work, there's never enough money? That life seems like an endless cycle of effort and frustration? Well, that's exactly how William Baker lived for many years. An ordinary, hard-working man, full of dreams, but trapped in a maze of financial difficulties. Every month, a new worry. Every day, the feeling of always being one step behind in his own life. But what happens when an ordinary person discovers an extraordinary power? The power to change everything through their own thoughts. William's story is living proof that prosperity begins within the mind, and that the law of attraction can transform scarcity into abundance when used with faith and purpose. Before we continue, tell me, do you believe it's possible to attract wealth simply by changing your mindset? If you do, or if you still have doubts, this story will move you. And of course, if you want to continue receiving inspiring stories like this, subscribe to the channel, like it, and comment below which city or country you're listening from. It's always incredible to see how far our stories are reaching. Now, take a deep breath and get ready, because what you're about to hear next isn't just a story about money. It's a story about faith, transformation, and the invisible power that resides within each of us. William Baker was the kind of person who carried the world on his shoulders, but always with a smile that tried to disguise his fatigue. He worked hard, day after day, as if time were his greatest enemy. The bills didn't wait, and the money seemed to slip through his fingers like fine sand. Yet, there was a subtle flame within him, a silent desire for something greater, something perhaps even he couldn't name. William's life was a repetition of identical days, filled with small battles and great uncertainties. The clock ticked away at the same pace as the bills piled up on the kitchen table. Breakfast was quick, the rush was certain, and the future always an unknown. He stared out the window and wondered silently if life would ever be different. There were nights when William lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about all that could have been. Old dreams faded with time, swallowed by routine and the feeling that success was a privilege reserved for the few. He found himself trapped in a seemingly endless cycle: work, pay, owe, start over. And no matter how hard he tried, the tide never turned in his favor. Money came and went with the same speed, and hope became a rare visitor. People around him said that's just how life is, and he, lacking strength, almost believed it. But there was something deep in his chest, a hint of stubbornness that whispered that perhaps there was a different path, a way to change course, even when everything said otherwise. At that stage, William didn't yet know it. But he was about to discover something that would completely change the way he saw the world and himself. A revelation that wouldn't come with fanfare, but that would transform every part of his life, starting with the way he thought. Waking up early was the norm in William's house. The alarm clock would ring before sunrise, and he was already up, trying to fit another day into the puzzle of survival. The bills piled up on the kitchen counter seemed to leer at him, reminding him of what he still couldn't pay. Each bill brought a twinge of anxiety, a silent reminder that effort was never enough. On his long commutes to work, he watched the city come alive, cars hustling, flashy storefronts, people rushing to get somewhere. William followed suit, but felt like he was going in circles. His salary barely covered his basic expenses, and every month it was the same race, paying for the essentials, postponing the rest, and hoping for the best. It was like chasing a train that never stopped. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, he would mentally do calculations, trying to figure out where he was going wrong. If I save on this, maybe I can pay for that, he thought, while sleep wouldn't come. But the problem wasn't just the money, it was the feeling of powerlessness, the invisible weight of someone who tries and never seems to get anywhere. William lived on a tightrope between fear and hope. Every unexpected event was a blow, and every small victory seemed to evaporate too quickly. The money never grew, and his dreams were shelved in the drawer of things that maybe someday. But no matter how hard the routine, he still believed something could change, even without knowing what or how. And it was precisely in this mix of exhaustion and desire for change that life began to move differently. A simple, almost imperceptible detail would soon open a new door, one he never imagined existed. From a young age, William heard phrases that stuck in his mind, like absolute truths. "Money doesn't grow on trees," his father would say, as he tightened his monthly belt. "Those who get rich are lucky," his mother would add, resigned. And so, without realizing it, he grew up believing that life was a constant struggle, and that wealth was a battle reserved for the chosen few. These words became deeply rooted in his mind. With each failed attempt to improve his life, he heard an inner voice repeating, "It's no use, you're not cut out for this." Over time, this belief became an invisible habit, shaping his decisions, sabotaging his dreams, and limiting the scope of his ambitions. William believed he was being realistic, but he lived as a prisoner of inherited thoughts. For him, hard work was the only way to survive, and anything beyond that seemed out of reach. The idea of making money easily or prospering with purpose seemed too much of a fantasy to be true. But something inside him, however timid, began to question, what if I'm wrong? What if the problem isn't the world, but what I believe about it? This thought, small and persistent, was like a spark igniting in the darkness of old convictions. It was in this restlessness, between what he had learned and what he was beginning to doubt, that a new story began to unfold. An unknown path awaited him, one that would require not physical strength, but a new way of thinking. It was a rainy afternoon when everything seemed to fall apart. William walked home with his shoes soaked and his head heavy. That morning, his boss had called him in for a quick chat, and he left without a job. The company was cutting costs, they said. He left with a heavy heart and an envelope containing his last paycheck, barely enough to last him the entire month. When he got home, the silence weighed more heavily than the sound of rain hitting the window. The bills sat on the table, as if waiting for final judgment. The rent was overdue, the credit card was maxed out, the refrigerator was nearly empty. He looked at it all and felt his heart sink. For the first time, he thought he might not be able to go on. In the following days, William wandered aimlessly. Time passed slowly, and his mind spiraled. He tried to mask his anguish with forced optimism, but the truth was, his faith was beginning to falter. He wondered what else he could do, and worse, if it was really worth trying again. It was in this silent abyss that something inside him began to shift. Sometimes, rock bottom is where the soul decides to awaken. Amidst the pain, a new feeling emerged, not of giving up, but of searching. A desire to understand why life seemed like an endless cycle of scarcity and struggle. It was in this state of vulnerability that fate decided to act. An unexpected encounter, a simple gesture, would soon plant the seed that would transform everything. One night, amidst so many others, when sleep stubbornly refused to come, William was distractedly browsing the internet. His weary gaze almost missed a video with the curious title, "The Secret to Attracting Prosperity." He almost closed the tab, but something made him stop. The serene voice narrating spoke of thoughts, energy, and inner power, words that somehow struck a chord. As he listened, he felt something different. It was as if, suddenly, a sliver of light had opened up amidst the fog of worry that enveloped his mind. The idea that his thoughts could shape his reality seemed absurd, but also fascinating. For the first time in a long time, he felt a glimmer of hope, something possible, even without understanding how. In the following days, William couldn't get the thought out of his head. He searched for more videos, read articles, and downloaded an old book on the subject. He discovered that many people credited their transformation to the so-called law of attraction. And the more he read, the more curious he became. Could thought really have power? He began to notice small signs, subtle coincidences, as if the universe were trying to speak to him. A phrase heard on the radio, a story told by a friend, even a bookstore advertisement, all seemed to point in the same direction. Change what you think, and you will change what you live. And this deeply moved him. Not knowing exactly what to expect, William decided to allow himself to believe, just a little, just to see what would happen. Little did he know that this small act of curiosity would be the first step on a journey that would transform everything he understood about life and about himself. In the early days, William laughed at himself. "How is thinking differently going to pay my bills?" he muttered, shaking his head. It seemed absurd to believe that simply changing the focus of his mind could transform an entire life. He still carried old beliefs, heavy as chains, and no matter how hard he tried to think positively, doubt always returned to haunt him. Still, something inside him pushed him to continue. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was desperation disguised as faith. Every morning, he tried to repeat affirmations in front of the mirror, feeling half foolish, half hopeful. "I am prosperous. Abundance flows to me." The words sounded strange, but somehow they comforted. His mind, accustomed to fear, resisted. Every time a bill arrived, the voice of the old thought returned. "See, this isn't working." But instead of giving up, William took a deep breath and tried to hold on. He didn't quite know what he was doing, but he felt he had to keep going, as if the mere act of trying was already a victory. There were times when he doubted everything. Believing in the invisible required more courage than facing any concrete problem. But little by little, he began to notice small changes, not in his pocket, but within himself. A different calm, a light, almost imperceptible sensation took over his days. And it was in this state of uncertainty and curious hope that William took his first real step toward transformation. He didn't know it yet, but the simple act of persistence was opening doors that had long seemed locked. One morning, William woke up feeling different. The sun streamed in through the crack in the window, and he felt that somehow that day called for a choice. It wasn't about money or luck. It was about deciding who he wanted to be from then on. He sat on the edge of his bed, looked at the floor, and with a deep sigh, made a silent commitment to himself. "This time, I'm going to see it through." He grabbed an old notebook and began writing down everything he wanted to change. It wasn't about possessions or numbers, but about feelings, freedom, peace, security. He also wrote down simple goals like paying off his debts, getting a new job, and believing in life again. As he wrote, he felt something vibrate inside him, a mixture of fear and hope. From that day on, William decided that his thoughts would be his allies, not his enemies. Every morning, even before breakfast, he would read his notes aloud and imagine what it would be like to live in that new reality. At night, he would give thanks, even if the day had been difficult. The practice of gratitude began to become a sacred ritual. The days remained challenging, it's true, but something in him had changed. He was no longer the same man who complained about his luck. He was someone who chose to believe, even without guarantees. He understood that changing the outside required first a change within. And so it was, step by step, word by word, that William began to build a new destiny. A path that would lead him to see the power that had always been there, within him, just waiting to be recognized. One silent night, William decided to try something new. He sat in the living room armchair, turned off the lights, and closed his eyes. He took a deep breath, as if to empty the world outside, and began to imagine. He saw himself debt-free, smiling at a tidy desk, with all his bills paid and a slight air of tranquility. For the first time, he tasted financial peace, even if only in his mind. He saw himself walking down a sunny street, wearing a simple suit, heading to a new job he loved. People greeted him, and he felt proud of himself. The sound of the city seemed sweeter, as if the entire universe were welcoming him. The more he imagined it, the more real it seemed. It was like watching a movie starring him, but now, with the happy ending he'd always wanted. Over time, this practice became a refuge. Every day before bed, William would visualize his abundant life in every detail: his tidy house, his growing bank account, the peaceful smile on his face. He would let himself be enveloped by that good feeling until he fell asleep with a light heart and a peaceful mind. The interesting thing is that the more he did this, the more natural it felt. Worry gave way to confidence, and anxiety gradually dissolved. William began to realize that change didn't begin with circumstances. It began within himself, with what he chose to feel and believe. And without realizing it, this simple daily practice began to open new paths. Small coincidences began to emerge, as if the universe were subtly responding to the new vibration emanating from her heart. At first, William found it strange to be thankful for things he didn't yet have. But gradually, he realized that gratitude wasn't about what one had, but about how one felt. He started with the basics: a roof over his head, hot coffee, a healthy body. Each thank you was like a seed planted in fertile soil. He couldn't see it growing, but he knew something was sprouting there. Every morning, before even picking up his phone, William would close his eyes and whisper, "Thank you for another day." At night, he would do the same, remembering every good thing that had happened, no matter how small. An unexpected smile, a kind conversation, a paid bill. Life seemed to take on color when viewed through the lens of gratitude. Over time, he began to feel something different. The worries still lingered, but they no longer held the same weight. It was as if his heart had learned to breathe lightly, even amidst the chaos. Giving thanks became as natural a habit as breathing, and each day seemed more generous, more filled with small miracles disguised as coincidence. William understood that gratitude was a silent but powerful force. It changed the way he saw everything, and as a result, the world began to treat him differently, too. He began to attract people and opportunities that resonated with him. Frequency of joy and recognition. And it was in this gentle, steady rhythm that life began to align, almost imperceptibly, with the new energy he was cultivating. With each thank you, an invisible door opened, and William was about to walk through one of them. The days began to feel different. Even though, on the surface, almost nothing had changed, William noticed he woke up feeling lighter, as if the invisible weight he'd carried for years had lifted. The same streets, the same faces, the same challenges, but something inside him was new. He smiled more easily, reacted with more patience, and that in itself was a huge victory. He noticed that his mind, previously dominated by fear and scarcity, was beginning to open up space for new ideas. What had previously been a problem now felt like an invitation to act differently. When something went wrong, William would take a deep breath and think, "What can I learn from this?" It was as if he had discovered a new language, the language of calm. People around him began to notice the difference. His gaze was calmer, his speech more confident, and he had a calm way of dealing with situations that would previously have left him desperate. This new energy seemed to permeate the room. Even cloudy days seemed to have a subtle glow, as if the whole world had changed colors. William began to see opportunities where he previously saw only barriers. A conversation with a neighbor turned into a job offer. An old business idea revived. He understood that the universe had always been full of possibilities. He was just blind to them, trapped in his own shadows. And the more gratitude he felt, the more the flow of life seemed to open up. There was a constant feeling that something good was on its way, even if he didn't yet know what. It was the harbinger of a new chapter, one that would bring him, step by step, closer to the prosperity he'd always dreamed of. That's when the coincidences began. One day, while walking downtown, William ran into an old coworker he hadn't seen in years. The conversation, which began casually, ended with an unexpected proposal of a partnership. "It seems like fate," his friend said, laughing. William smiled, but deep down he knew nothing was by chance. In the following days, other small signs began to appear. A forgotten email that brought an opportunity. A book that fell from the shelf, open to just a sentence he needed to read. Even a song on the radio seemed to speak to his thoughts. It was as if the universe was orchestrating everything in silence, connecting points that previously seemed loose. Each sign awakened in him a mixture of surprise and gratitude. William began to pay more attention to the details, the subtleties, the coincidences that he now knew were not coincidences. He began to realize that when the mind changes, the whole world responds, like a mirror reflecting the new brilliance that came from within. He felt guided, even without understanding exactly where. It was like walking along a road lit only by small lanterns, one at a time, showing the next step. The feeling of confidence grew, and with it, the certainty that he was on the right path. These signs were just the beginning. The universe, patient and generous, was about to show William that true prosperity goes far beyond money. It's a state of being, a harmony that transforms everything it touches. Everything seemed to be going well, until, suddenly, the universe decided to test whether William truly believed in what he had been practicing. It was a random morning when he received a call. An old, forgotten debt had been reactivated. The amount was high and the deadline was short. For a few seconds, the old fear tightened his chest again. That same familiar chill of someone who fears losing what little they have. That night, William sat at the table and stared at the scattered papers. His first thought was to give up, to think it was all an illusion. "See, it doesn't work," whispered the old voice from the past. But before despair overcame him, he took a deep breath and remembered the words he'd been repeating. "I trust. Everything is aligning in my favor." It was difficult. His mind tried to drag him back to the old pattern, but his heart insisted on the new belief. William decided not to give in to fear. Instead of complaining, he gave thanks. Instead of despairing, he wrote in his notebook, "This situation has a purpose. Something good is coming from this." It was the first time he had responded to scarcity with true faith. The following days were a test of patience. He didn't know how he would solve everything, but he refused to return to his previous despair. He continued practicing gratitude, doing his visualizations, believing that the path would reveal itself. Gradually, the anguish transformed into serenity, as if the simple act of trusting was already the answer he sought. And then, when he least expected it, an unlikely solution appeared, a new opportunity, some extra money, a conversation that opened doors. William understood that faith isn't about believing when everything is going well, but when nothing seems to make sense. And that was the moment he truly began to understand the power he carried within. After the shock, William realized there was something different about him. In other times, that problem would have been enough to throw him back into the abyss of worry. But this time, it wasn't. He chose a different response. He sat in silence, closed his eyes, and repeated to himself, "Everything is fine. I trust." And the more he said it, the more his heart calmed. He understood that life would always bring challenges, but now he knew that how he reacted made all the difference. Instead of focusing on the lack, he concentrated on the solution. And, curiously, ideas began to emerge more clearly. His mind, once consumed by fear, now seemed like an open field, ready to create. William began to use each obstacle as a reminder of his new commitment, to think, feel, and act like someone who is already prosperous. When something bothered him, he no longer asked, "Why is this happening to me?" but rather, "What is this trying to teach me?" This simple change in question completely altered his energy. Over time, trust became a habit. He learned to align himself with peace, even when circumstances screamed otherwise. And that's when he realized something powerful. Outer life is merely a reflection of inner life. When he shifted within, everything around him began to reorganize itself, almost like magic. And so, day by day, William became the conscious creator of his own story. He still didn't see the complete picture, but he felt that destiny was being painted with new colors, and this time, he was the one holding the brush. One morning, while sipping coffee and rereading his gratitude notebook, William had a sudden idea, simple yet powerful. It was a project he'd sketched out years ago and set aside, thinking it wasn't good enough. This time, something inside him whispered, "Try again." And without hesitation, he began to put it into action, fueled by a new, almost contagious energy. Over the next few days, he threw himself into it. He created a plan, made contacts, fine-tuned details, and courageously presented his proposal to a local company. The result? A positive response and a job opportunity he never imagined he'd get. It was the beginning of something bigger, something that started small but held the potential to change everything. With the new project, William began to see his financial flow change. His accounts began to balance, and little by little, he began to have more than he needed. But what surprised him most wasn't the money itself, it was how effortlessly everything was happening. Life seemed to flow effortlessly, as if the pieces had finally fallen into place. Confidence became fuel. William realized that the universe responded not to doubt, but to certainty. And now, with a heart full of faith and a mind aligned, he saw doors opening naturally. Opportunities arrived without him needing to chase after them. He simply had to be in the right vibration. And so, almost without realizing it, the financial turnaround happened. It wasn't a stroke of luck, nor a sudden miracle. It was the result of the internal transformation he had been cultivating for months. And deep down, William knew this was only the beginning of something much bigger. Over time, William began to realize that true prosperity wasn't just about the growing numbers in his account. It was something deeper, something that came from within. He noticed that the more at peace he felt, the more life flowed naturally. Money was now a consequence, not the goal. His focus had shifted, and with it, everything around him seemed lighter, more beautiful, more meaningful. He began to see abundance in small things, in a child's laughter, in a golden sunset, in the simple fact of having a new day ahead. Gratitude made him see that being prosperous was a state of consciousness, not a quantity of money. And this discovery set him free. William no longer lived in the rush of before. Now he lived with presence, with purpose. His mind, once noisy, had become a calm place. When something didn't go as planned, he no longer saw it as a problem, but as part of the journey. This serenity made him understand that life doesn't happen against us, but for us. Each challenge came with a message, and he learned to listen to it wisely. William began to inspire others around him. Friends, family, and even co-workers noticed something different about him, a light, a tranquility that seemed contagious. And when they asked what had changed, he would smile and say, "I stopped fighting against life and started flowing with it." And it was in this state of expanded consciousness that he discovered the true meaning of the law of attraction. It wasn't just about wishing, but about being, about vibrating in the energy of what you want, until the universe has no choice but to reflect it back. Over time, people began to notice William's transformation. The man who had once walked with his head down now radiated tranquility. It was impossible not to notice the difference, and naturally, the questions came. What happened to you? He smiled, his gaze serene, and said, "I learned to change here inside, to see life change outside." This simple phrase touched the hearts of those who listened. William began sharing his experiences with close friends in late afternoon conversations, always with humility and sincerity. He spoke about the importance of thoughts, gratitude, faith, and visualization. He said everyone had the same power within them. They just needed to believe. And each person who listened to him left with a new sparkle in their eyes, as if something had been awakened. Soon, the circle of interested people grew. William began writing short reflections and posting them on social media without any grand pretensions. But his words resonated deeply with many. Comments began to pour in. "This changed my day. You made me believe again." He realized then that his personal journey was inspiring others to begin their own transformation. What was once just an intimate process became a mission. William felt the universe had led him to this purpose, to show people that they too could co-create their own reality. And the more he shared, the more he felt his energy expand, as if each word were a blessing multiplied. And so, naturally and quietly, William became a source of inspiration. The man who once doubted his own worth was now teaching others to see theirs. And little did he know that this stream of light was only just beginning to form. William's life now had a different rhythm. He still woke up early, but it wasn't out of obligation. It was pleasure. The first thing he did each day was always the same: giving thanks. He was grateful for the sunshine streaming through the window, the fresh air, the simple fact of being alive. Before any task, he took a few minutes to meditate, breathe deeply, and align his mind with the sense of abundance he had learned to cultivate. His routine was guided by purpose, not haste. He wrote down his goals, but also his emotions, observing how he felt with each achievement, no matter how small. When money came in, he received it with gratitude, and when it went out, he blessed it with the same feeling. May this amount return multiplied and bring prosperity to all involved, he would say to himself. The old habits of worry and scarcity had been replaced by confidence and wisdom. William understood that money was energy, and like all energy, it flowed best when treated with respect and love. He no longer spent impulsively, nor did he save out of fear. Now, every financial choice was accompanied by awareness and serenity. Prosperity was reflected in everything, in the way he walked, in the way he talked, in the calm gleam of his eyes. He no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. His success was silent, built on the harmony between what he thought, felt, and did. And interestingly, the more he lived with gratitude, the more the universe seemed to reciprocate. The flow of opportunities had become constant, not because he anxiously sought them, but simply because he was ready to receive them. One night, as he gazed up at the star-studded sky, William let his mind wander back in time. He remembered the man he'd been, insecure, tired, and full of fear. He remembered the sleepless nights, the piling bills, the times he doubted himself. For a moment, he felt a tightness in his chest, not of regret, but of gratitude, because now he understood. All of that had prepared him for this new moment. He realized that the enemy he so feared was never outside. The strongest barriers were invisible, erected within his own mind. He had spent years believing the world was difficult, that life was unfair, that he deserved no more than the bare necessities. And it was this silent belief that kept him trapped, until the day he decided to look within and break free. William smiled as he thought about how life changes when we change. What once seemed impossible now felt natural. The abundance, the lightness, the peace, all of it was always there, just waiting to be acknowledged. It was as if the universe had been saying all along, "I've always been on your side. I just hoped you'd believe it." As he reflected, he felt a deep emotion, as if he were saying goodbye to a past version of himself. There was no anger, no guilt, only acceptance. He knew that this man from the past had done the best he could with what he knew. And now, with awareness and love, William could finally move forward, free. The night breeze seemed to whisper that something new was being born again. Because when the soul heals from fear, the future opens like a fertile field, ready to blossom into infinite possibilities. Calm mind. William came to understand something that deep down had always been before him. Everyone has the power to transform their lives. It's not luck, nor chance. It's synchronization. He realized that when thought, emotion, and action work together. The universe responds precisely. It's like dancing with life. When you move to the right rhythm, everything flows with grace and harmony. William now understood that the law of attraction isn't just about wishing, but about being. It's about feeling prosperous before the money arrives, about being grateful before the results appear, because the energy we emit is the invitation the universe accepts. And when we live in a vibration of abundance, opportunities simply appear, like birds landing where the air is calmer. He began to see the world as a large mirror. Everything he saw outside was a reflection of what existed within. If he cultivated love, he received love. If he vibrated in scarcity, the world returned more of the same frequency. This realization changed everything, and with it came the serenity of one who has discovered the simple yet powerful secret. Reality is a constant creation of the awakened mind. William began to speak about this tenderly, not as someone teaching, but as someone sharing something he'd experienced. He told his story and said, "You already have everything you need within you. You just need to believe enough to let it blossom." And those who listened felt something awaken, an ancient memory that, yes, life can be generous when you believe in it. And so through words, smiles, and new connections, William became a beacon. Not because he had it all, but because he learned to radiate faith, gratitude, and purpose. And he knew that as long as he kept his heart on that frequency, the universe would continue to conspire in his favor. One day, while walking through the city, William passed a bookstore. He smiled as he remembered how, years ago, it was there that he had bought his first book on the law of attraction, the one that had changed everything. On impulse, he went in. Amidst the colorful shelves and the smell of new pages, a clerk recognized him. "You're William Baker, aren't you? The one with the prosperity stories?" He laughed in surprise. Life really did take turns. She said she began watching his videos and reading his social media posts. She said his words inspired her to change too, and, her eyes shining, she thanked him. William was silent for a moment, feeling his heart fill with deep emotion. In that moment, she realized the cycle had come full circle. The man she once sought inspiration from was now her source. A short time later, an unexpected invitation arrived. A publisher wanted to publish a book with his story and his reflections on prosperity. William was speechless. The same man who once doubted himself would now have his lessons in print, spreading light wherever they went. It wasn't just a financial achievement. It was the symbol of his complete transformation. On the day of the launch, seeing people moved by his words, William understood the true meaning of abundance. It's not about having more, but about sharing what you have. Prosperity, after all, isn't a destination. It's a state of mind, a vibration that overflows and touches others. And, as he signed another copy, he looked up at the sky and smiled. The same universe that once seemed indifferent now embraced him in perfect synchrony. Because when the heart vibrates with faith and gratitude, life takes care of returning everything in ways we can't even imagine. And so, William Baker's story became more than a tale of overcoming adversity. It became a reminder that we all carry within us the power to create a new reality. Money was merely the outward reflection of a much deeper change, a transformation of mind, heart, and faith. William learned that prosperity isn't about chasing things, but about aligning with what you desire, with serenity and confidence. When thought, feeling, and action come together, the universe responds. And that's where the magic happens, not outside, but within us. If this story touched your heart, remember, the same power that guided William also resides within you. Just start with a thought, a gesture of gratitude, a decision to change. Life always responds to the energy you choose to vibrate. And before I go, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and continue following our inspiring stories about prosperity, faith, and transformation. Leave a like and tell us in the comments what impacted you most on this journey. Because who knows, the next story we tell could be yours.